Hello friends, Jennifer Pearson here. If you hear white noise suddenly in the background, it's my cooling unit. It makes a lot of noise when it's running. But right, it just switched off, just kind of as the video started. I also have dogs in the room, so if there's a sudden explosion, it's them reacting to something that probably is insignificant. Right now they're all napping. So Memorial Day came and went here in the United States. It hasn't been quite a week yet. But I had really wanted to do something for that day, but I ended up working and being too tired and didn't know quite what I wanted to do. And I still didn't. I had to really sit down today and think about it. So one thing I wanted to point out was the beginning of what I'm going to call icons for certain lines of the family. And I'm still missing one, and I still need to reconnect with one of the lines. But I'll show you what I have so far. And they're right here. So this is a mug. It ended up being chipped, but it has books on it. And this is for my mother's line. They were readers, have been readers, and been educated, etc. And Scottish, English ancestry, and tea drinkers. So that's why I chose this mug for that. And then a peacock feather. I'm not sure if it's even going to show up very well. Just a little bit of a peacock feather here. And I chose that because one time when I did a shamanic journey with them, there was a ceremony in which a peacock feather, a person who was conducting the ceremony, it wasn't me, touched the forehead of each person in a circle with a peacock feather. So touching the eye to their forehead or on the top of their head. And so I thought, oh, all right, an icon for this line of ancestors. So I grabbed onto that. And it's my mother's father's line that I don't currently have a particular icon for at the moment. My father's mother's line, I have the tambourine, which I'm not going to sound off with it right now because my dogs are sleeping and I don't want to wake them up. A couple of them find it very alarming. One of them is quite shy of it. The other one sees it as an invitation to play. And then my father's line, I have a Swedish Dala horse. Actually, I should back up this candle here, which is not lit at the moment. Again, I would have had to have disturbed a dog to get to my long matches, but this is one of those tall candles. This is also part of my my father's mother's line. I need to give them some other kind of name or something. And that was because of a card that came up in my initial connection to them when I was pulling cards. I think it was a card from the Native Spirit deck. And I was thinking of that because this also was suggested by the Native Spirit deck. So when I was initially kind of looking into this line of ancestors, my father's line, the card that the Native Spirit deck gave me was Freedom Horse. And I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? I mean, I love horses. Hard to tell that on this channel particularly, but I was very into horses when I was younger. And I thought, you know, Swedish warm bloods, you know, I don't associate horses a lot with Sweden. And so I looked it up. I Googled Swedish horses or horses Sweden or something like that, and came up with this traditional Dala horse, which actually, now that I'm thinking about it, and I'm here talking about Memorial Day, which has to do with war, doesn't have to strictly have to do with war, but pretty much it's a national holiday in remembrance of those who gave their lives for the country. And the Dala horse is about, and I can't remember which war it was, but it was a wartime situation where some soldiers were like camped out at a homestead or something, and for lack of anything to do, one of the soldiers carved this horse and gave it to, you know, in this style, and gave it to the daughter of the homesteader or something like that. And it initiated a tradition. And this, speaking of traditions, normally they're bright red. I didn't think I could deal with that bright red as part of my household. And so I just got this little one in black. So those are my ancestral associations right now as they stand, and it probably won't get any more elaborate than that. I don't have a lot of pictures, and I doubt that I would put up a lot of pictures. Again, it's just sort of reminders in my environment, I guess is the way I think of it. But about Memorial Day, again, technically, you know, the national holiday is to remember those who have given their lives so that we could live today safely and provided for, etc., who've protected the country and, by extension, everyone that comes after. But it can also be for other kinds of remembrances, which is why I decided to also share all of this. But it brought to mind, too, because the people that I know of most directly involved in a war. My father, served for a couple of years in the military, but there was no war going on at that time. It was just something that young men did. I don't think there was any conscription involved. Maybe there was, but in any case, he was in, there was no war, he was out. And it got me thinking about the people who most directly were in fact involved in World War II, which was my grandfather, who's passed away, and an uncle, who I think was only like 13 or 14 at the time, but managed to get in. So, I don't know, he must have lied about his age or something, but managed to get in. And he is on my mind anyway, because I recently was doing a deck, an extended deck testing sort of, not an interview. I did the deck interviews, and then I went on and tested the deck in different kinds of readings, the Hoodoo Tarot. And one of the things I decided to do, because this deck has a lot of personalities in it, a lot of actual people assigned to cards, historical people, that I decided to use the deck for a spiritual allies spread. And the first question of that spread was, who is your guardian? And I got this 7 of Knives, so similar to the 7 of Swords. So I got this 7 of Knives. And what you have there, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see, like there's a spoon in her hand, and then there are leaves on the spoon, and there are leaves going into the pot there. She's so happy. It's a very housewife advertisement kind of look on her face. But the way that it's related to the usual 7 of Swords is that what she's doing is sneaky. So she is putting, I can't remember, I think it's feathers actually. I think it's the feathers of some bird that she is cooking in the stew. And then she's going to remove them. But having put them in there and then serving them to your husband is supposed to prevent your husband from dallying outside of the relationship. So she's working her magic there, unbeknownst to her husband. And so this was really like a brain strain for me. I'm thinking, all right, what is this giving me here? I'm thinking, all right, I had to step back. And at first I just thought, all right, somebody who was sneaky, or fox-like, kind of coming up blank in that regard. And then I was thinking, all right, somebody who's a good cook or a creative cooker, chef, whatever, who's not currently alive, that I would have known that they were a good chef. And then it dawned on me, that is my uncle. That is my mother's brother. And I didn't know him as, I barely knew him actually. But they didn't live near us, and his work was actually with the U.S. government after his service in World War II. And that's what he retired from. So he stayed in some form of government. I don't know if it was always the military, but some form of government service. That was his life. It was his entire life. And we knew rather early on that he couldn't talk about it, because what he did was secret stuff. And just recently, I was reading, my mother has been going through old stuff and she's been distributing it. And she sent a bunch of letters that were sent first to my sister and then to me. My sister sent them to me, and then when I'm done, I'm sending them to a cousin who has been designated the family archivist. These were letters that were sent to my mother when she was in college for her first year. She was away from home, and her mother was writing her almost every day, and her sister was writing occasionally. She had things going on in her life. But one of the letters was from my grandmother to my mother, talking about this uncle coming home, and briefly, very briefly, he was supposed to have a leave or something, but he couldn't. He can only like stop and go. And there's a mention in it, in this letter, that he was attached to a briefcase. That he, it's one of those things that you see, I've only heard of really in spy movies, and I don't know even if it was entirely true, but so this is the impression that I get from the letter, that he was attached to one of these things, and that my grandmother also relayed that there was another identical such briefcase that was continuously in transit. And we knew kind of early on, you don't ask this uncle about his profession, because he can't talk about it. And supposedly what was in that again, according to grandmother, and again, this is according to what my uncle told her at that time, which may not have been true, intentionally, might not have been true, that it had to do with, I think it was ICBM missile systems or something that were being developed at the time. This was in the 1950s. So I didn't know him as a cook. However, I had heard lots of rumors about him as a cook. And so he was a creative cook. So I think it was when the word chef hit me, I thought, chef, oh. And he never worked as a chef. He just took pride in his cooking. And I remember, I don't know if it's my brother and sister, anyway, that they learned how to make a special potato, mashed potatoes. You had to make them, or attempt to make them like this uncle, and all of his special ingredients, just like she has special ingredients that she puts in things here. And he was also very creative. Actually, he made a stained glass window that went in a local church in the community where my parents ended up retiring. So my uncle retired to this community, and then when my parents retired, there was quite a stretch in years between my mother and this brother who was older. And so when my parents retired, they moved down to the same community as him in order to be closer to him. So, and see him after so many years of my mother not being able to hang out with him, etc. But I was on the other side of the country at this point. I was nowhere near them. So I had this card already that was, and there was no elaboration. It was this question about who is your guardian, and it went on to a different question. And so there was no elaboration. So I thought what I would do for this Memorial Day ancestry card pull and general talk, show and tell of the little icons here, was to elaborate on this a little bit. So the first question is, what impact did his service to the country have on his life? And so I'm approaching this, there is one of these questions that's going to be kind of directed at him, but I'm kind of taking the tack of the Ancestral Tarot book that I'm reading. And what she does a lot of there is not talking directly to an ancestor, but finding out about an ancestor by asking questions of the tarot about that person. So it's not like, it's not asking to whatever ancestor, your great-great-grandmother, how are you? It's not quite like mediumship. It's not like saying, how are you, or what do you think of my life, or what do you think of this person I'm dating? So it's not like a direct communication. It's more like an investigation of who that person was and what their life was like. So at least that's what I'm getting out of that book at this point. It's more oriented toward, you don't have to know somebody, but if you do know somebody, if you're doing your family tree and you pick an ancestor and you want to know about that ancestor's character, then you would pick a card for that, as opposed to a more mediumistic kind of attempt to have a conversation with them or call on them to aid you or something like that. So this is going to straddle that finding out about and direct question. You could say that reading the Ancestral Tarot has kind of got me shifting and changing in my approach here, not knowing quite what to do. And so, but anyway, so here we go. The first one is what, and I pre-shuffled this deck, what impact did his service to the country have on his life? Ten of Cups. I thought this might be a happy card, because he stayed in the military. And, you know, he went into the military to follow his father, to do the same thing as his father. So it can, you know, he may have thought of it in terms of protecting his family, feeling that he had a safe place to have a full life. You know, he stayed in, and so apparently there was something that he liked or enjoyed or found affirming about that work. I don't know to what extent, you know. I don't think either my grandfather or my uncle talked about any direct battle experience. So I don't know. I have no idea. And it's one of those things where I feel like it's not appropriate to pry, even after life, you know, after they're gone. So here, and obviously continuing to work for the government, provided them with a decent living. Second question. What advice does he have for me for protecting myself? So this is, again, a more direct question. The Two of Swords. How interesting. The word skepticism is coming to mind for some reason. I would say that this card is also about trusting your intuition. This particular depiction of this card is even more focused on the moon than a traditional Rider-Waite-Smith is, and it's a full moon. So that's what I get out of that. Two words, skepticism, and the phrase, trust your intuition. It's interesting how we usually think of this as guarding your heart, but here it's almost like, you know, the cross is down on your gut. It's almost like, you know, and you could say trust your gut too, or guard your gut in some way. It's also potentially depicted there. All right, so the next question is, how can I call on him when I feel the need for protection? I don't know that any calling on is really necessary. If this card came up as an ally, then he's probably there anyway. Again, being sneaky, sly, undercover, all of that kind of stuff. Not wanting to be seen or heard or whatever. I will say this also, when this card brought him to mind, it wasn't like a total shock, even though I was never close to this person. When he passed away, not too long after he passed away, I was visiting my parents. And again, they were living in the same community that he was in. And I had a dream in which he appeared. And it was nothing dramatic. It was kind of like he appeared just to say hello. It was just really weird. But I remembered it, and obviously I still remember it, just because it was so out of... It was kind of like For one thing, I don't remember my dreams very often. It was very out of the blue, and it was also kind of a, why me? If you're going to appear to somebody, why me? Or even if at that time it was out of my thinking that it would be like a spiritual contact of some kind, or a spirit contact of some kind, it would be, why would I have a dream like that, when I have no direct connection to this person, really. I mean, I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen him. I think in the time that he and my parents were living in the same community, I don't think I ever saw him during that time. So it was, it could have been like 20 years since I had seen him. Alright, so how can I call on him when I feel the need for protection? The Three of Swords. Well, that's interesting. I'm not entirely sure what to make of that. Except, swords are sometimes taken as, for one, communication. And sometimes, because of that association with communication, pens, like a nib pen or something, a fountain pen, something like that. He's in the military. That's three short messages. It could be SOS. It could be as simple as that. SOS. What's interesting to me is that this came up, and again, this is often associated with the heart. But I'm getting that, and so we've got two swords here. Again, appropriate for military in many ways. And for a person who was clearly very clever, and from a family line that is also quite clever on both sides of the family. It could just be about writing, like writing a message. Interesting. And the last one is, how can I show gratitude to him for his direct protection of me and other relations? So if he's my guardian spirit, I expect he's a guardian spirit across the board for all of the relations, all of my cousins on that side of the family. My mother's still around. All of her, parents and siblings are gone. He was the one to go before her. She will be the last. But I expect all of the nieces and nephews, if he's looking after me, that he's looking after all of them. And this is gratitude not for his service to the United States, in the country, but direct service in terms of protection of me and other relations who I care about. Again, I assume this would include my sister, my brother, my mother, probably my father as well, even though he's not a direct relation. I expect it's across the board. Oh, the star. Isn't that sweet? I don't know, libations. I'll have to give that a little bit of thought. He was somebody who also liked to garden. It's interesting. Both my mother liked to garden, and my aunt and this uncle. And I'm guessing that was passed down from my grandmother on that side, my mother's mother. And so I was thinking, I was looking at the plants here, and there's some flowering plants. I was thinking of gardening, like a memorial garden, but I would think that that would, and I'm not even going to have access to the earth eventually. I will probably move into an apartment or something. So it would be more like having a plant or a garden, an indoor garden in a container. But there are a lot of possibilities expressed here, actually. I mean, there's the whole possibility of libations with the pouring of the water. There's the association with the stars, of course. I don't know. I don't know exactly what I'll do there. You know, they often say that to honor an ancestor, that giving them a glass of their favorite drink, and that's why I thought this was appropriate, this mug, as opposed to a teacup. I actually have my grandmother's, I think 3 or 4 dark blue. It would probably disappear on this. This is actually a pillowcase. Actually, this tarot cloth, pillowcase tarot cloth, because it is even, I guess it's even darker than this. They're very dark blue cups that are little teacups. Not fine teacups. They're a heavier ceramic, more like this, but they're teacups, as opposed to this big, looks more like a coffee mug or hot chocolate mug or something like that. But I don't have any idea what his favorite, you know, alcoholic beverage or anything. I have no idea. It was probably coffee. So I would be a little bit at a loss in terms of what kind of liquid to provide. But I'll have to give it some thought, definitely. Alright, so there you go. I'll put the questions down in the description box in case anybody else finds them useful, interesting. But I'm not going to go any further. I thought I was going to make it just to 30, and I've already rambled enough to get beyond that. So we'll call it done. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you all again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.